Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, and we are officially 2.5 months down in the 24-25 NBA season, and at the end of December it's time to give an update on my MVP race for the year. There have been a couple of movers and shakers, there's been a couple of new appearances, there's some well-maintained positions and a couple of interesting questions to be raised moving forward, no doubt. Some injury impacts, some seeding impacts are going to change the outlook of this list, and certainly moving forward that's going to change the outlook of this list as well. We'll see what everyone thinks, but we'll see where you have your own MVPs as well, and a few interesting players entering into this list for sure. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into my MVP race to the end of December for the 2024-25 NBA season. Of course, we go with the qualifying points. These haven't changed in quite some time, and while it isn't necessarily a perfect system, I feel it's a reasonably well reflected system. I go through every game, every day to pick out a best player, the best player on the winning team, and that's where I really value leading your team to wins as one of my points. The best player on the winning team receives a point. You accumulate points throughout the season. To certain points is when I measure my my ladder and my rankings and my race, and that's where we sort of get the seedings here. Of course, other factors, not only leading your team to wins, is a 65 game pace. So you still have to have the ability at the time of compiling the list to be able to play 65 games. Now, you'll notice some of these guys here certainly are going to be in contention for 65 games. Others are likely to drop off, whether that's through injury or consistent up and downs not being with the team. Whilst you're winning games, you're obviously going to be keeping your team in playoff contention, so playoff hopes are crucial. There's only been one MVP in league history that didn't make the postseason. So, law of averages suggests that, you've got to be right up there. You've got to be leading your team to wins. I generally use that to the 8th seed. I have consistently thought about moving it to the 6th seed because of the play-in, but I think the 8th seed is still pretty accurate there. And, of course, no trade talk. Ideally, you can't be the number one guy to be traded, and you can't be traded at all. So if you're a guy that has been traded, good chance you're not going to be seen in this list. And the reason I say that is, where is the value in a guy that gets traded? Like, he clearly can't be the most valuable player. If you're trading him away, I know teams have different circumstances, but ideally, I wouldn't want to be trading away the MVP of my league. So my qualifications, 65 game pace, leading your team to wins, no trade talk or the reason for a trade, and certainly in playoff contention and showing playoff hopes. So, now that they're outlined once again, let's get stuck into the honourable mentions, the guys that didn't quite make the cut to the end of December. First honourable mention is certainly not one that I thought I'd ever have in this list this season, and certainly not one I thought I'd see in this list for a couple of seasons, but there's no doubt about it for me, Cade Cunningham certainly deserves an honourable mention in my MVP list to the end of December. Of course, Cunningham, a member of the Detroit Pistons, who have bounced back from being arguably the worst team to ever step onto the floor to a play-in team in contention. To the end of December, Detroit are the 10th seed in the East, and they are causing a few headaches there in the Eastern Conference. They're sort of proving to be a bit more of a barometer team than people first thought, and Cade certainly has been the leader of that team. In 28 games, he's averaged 35.9 minutes. The team has gone 13 and 15, and I have Cade responsible for 9 of those wins. On the season so far, he's averaged 24 points, 6.7 rebounds, 9.7 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.9 blocks on 4.4 turnovers. Obviously, the efficiency rate is something that you'd like to see improve. 44.7 from the field, nearly 4.5 turnovers a game. That's quite high, but he is getting there at a clip, even with ball in hand. 36.2% from 3, 80.3% from the free throw line. Cunningham is the max guy on this team, and it's clear to see that he's taking that role very seriously. This is a guy who for the last couple of years has racked up numbers on an empty team. A lot of people rack up numbers on empty teams. The real test is when you get onto a team that's productive or a team that becomes good Can you continue to produce, or do you have to take a lesser role for another star to come in? And Cade has continued to step up there, and that's something that I'm really, really liking. He's a guard that doesn't mind shooting a jump shot, that doesn't mind attacking the hoop, but he's a guy that uses his size as well, and that's something that I can really get about. A guy who, even as a guard, is going to take on a smaller opponent. He's going to try and back them down. He's going to try and take the space. He's trying to assert himself to position to try and get a score. Other than that, he runs a really good point game there, consistently having 25, 5 and 10 weeks throughout the year, which is really good to see. So an honourable mention there to Cade Cunningham for the Detroit Pistons. 9 wins out of 13 in the 28 games that he is played. And no doubt we will see him a little later on in the year, whether that's as an All-Star or an All-NBA member. My next honourable mention, well, this one's tough, and it purely comes down to that playoff hope thing that I've spoken about. I know it's within a play-in tournament, but it's that real playoff hope thing right now. The Spurs are a 9th seed to the end of December, and that's the ultimate turning point of where Victor Wembanyama sits in this list. An honourable mention for a guy who is likely for me going to finish, when you look at wins and you look at contributions, likely going to finish top 5, top 6 on the season, likely going to be the Defensive Player of the Year, genuine All-NBA first-team contender. Now, I can differentiate as to where that sits versus your MVP. I don't think your MVP can come from outside of the playoffs, and I don't think your MVP can realistically nowadays be a second-team member. It has happened in the past. There were different voting circumstances relating to that there. That's a big reason why you'll see someone like a Bill Russell with more seconds than first, despite the fact he had MVP seasons in the second team. That's not going to happen anymore. That's pure and simple. The big thing is going to be leading your team to wins, getting your team into the postseason. That's where your MVP conversation is going to come from, particularly from a mainstream standpoint. But for me, Victor Wembanyama, let's just say that I think you would see him in that top 5. If the Spurs are in the playoffs, if they get on a bit of a run, there's no doubt he's going to jump up this list. Huge year for Wemby once again. 25.6 points, 10 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1 steal and 3.9 blocks to the end of December. 48% from the field, 35.3 from deep and 81.9 from the line. Played in 28 games, averaged a tad under 33 minutes, 15 and 13 record, and he's been the best player in 13 of those 15 wins. This is phenomenal stuff from a guy in his second season. Probably should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's the only guy that I've seen in my lifetime, certainly watching the NBA, but certainly in my lifetime, that looks like they're a very good chance to catch that Hakeem Olajuwon all-time blocks record. To have that sort of dexterity as a two-way centre, to be genuinely compared to a Hakeem Olajuwon. That's a huge compliment. I know there's other comps going around as far as where he sits, play style like a Ralph Sampson, what sort of ceiling can he have in comparison to someone like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But right now, Victor is on his own trajectory. I got no issues with saying he's been a top 5 player in the league this year, but based on what my criteria is for the MVP, he just isn't in the 10 yet. Spurs get to the playoffs, get in contention there, you've got a different game plan going ahead there. But right now, another honourable mention to Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs. Now, let's get into the 10. Coming in at number 10, and you can do your own powers of deduction for the next couple of guys I'm going to mention and just where they may sit or rank had other teams been playoff contention. I'll let you work that out. But I do have to stick to my guns here. I do have to stick to how I assess this here because it's only fair. But at number 10, I have Jaren Jackson Jr., the Memphis Grizzlies. In my MVP race to the end of December. There's not a lot of talk around what Jaren Jackson Jr. is doing for this Memphis squad, but it should be recognised exactly what he's done with this team for the better part of 4 years right now. Probably should have 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards. He's certainly making a case potentially to win a second actual award this year. If it wasn't for the guy I just mentioned and Dyson Daniels in Atlanta. He's had a really, really big season, an under-the-radar season. On both sides of the floor at an efficient rate, at a highly impactful rate, as you can see there. In 31 games, he's played 28.2 minutes a game, 21 and 10 record under his stewardship, and I've got him for 8 wins on the season. He's averaged 21.6 points, 5.9 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.5 steals, and 1.7 blocks on 2.1 turnovers. An efficient score at 49.2%, 34.8 from deep. He doesn't take them very often, but he's becoming a bit more consistent from beyond the arc. And he's not necessarily a guy you can foul either. 81.8% from the free throw line for a big man. Pretty consistent stuff there. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a two-handed player in the sense that he's going to be able to attack you on both sides of his body. He's very, very ambidextrous. Defensively, that's what makes him an absolute gun. That's what makes him a really tough matchup. And that's ultimately what's keeping this Memphis team really ticking over. Spoken about it last year, spoke about it the year before. Health, always going to be a factor. Attitude, always going to be a factor. Getting a key rotation of players, a solid chemistry of players was always going to help this team. And that's exactly what we've found out is happening with Memphis this year. Ja Morant, really good season. Desmond Bane, really good season. Wells and Edey have been key rotational players. Marcus Smart still being a key rotational player. Someone like, again, Jaren Jackson Jr. leading the way. This is where this team is really coming together. Scottie Pippen Jr., another key piece as well. You've got guys that are getting in, playing their role, really capitalising on what's being presented to them. They're getting wins. They're delivering. Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably the most underrated out of all of them, but I still feel he's been Memphis' best player this year. Got him at 8 wins. Got him at an All-NBA level. I think he has to be really in consideration at an All-NBA level, and certainly at an All-Defensive level. Massive season for Jaren Jackson Jr. Career year right now, and that's why I have him at number 10 in my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season. Coming in at number 9, and this is a guy right now that really has to be up there as one of the most improved players in this league. There are a lot of contenders for that award this year, but Norman Powell really has to be up there. I know he's playing on a reasonable roster right now who are contributing. He does have a nice solid point guard next to him. He does have a capable center. But Norman Powell's having one of the better smaller guard seasons in recent memory. And that's why I've got him at number 9 from the Los Angeles Clippers, Norman Powell. 26 games played, 33.3 minutes a game. The Clippers are 15-11 when he plays, and I've got him as responsible for 9 wins for this team on the season. 24.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.2 blocks on 2.1 turnovers. So you're starting to see some efficiency come into this as well. 49% from the field, 45.1 from deep, and 85% from the free throw line. This is a guy who can score at all levels, who does it efficiently, and doesn't turn the ball over. So if he's got the ball in hand, he's going to make a smart decision. He's going to be able to convert on his decisions. And if he doesn't, and he's given an extra opportunity, he's going to make those as well. A lot of factors obviously coming into play with why Norman Powell's having a bit more freedom this year. Number 1, James Harden's to an all-star level. There's no doubt about it. He's been one of the better productive point guards in the league this year. We know what Harden can do as a playmaker. On the other side of it, someone like an Ivica Zubac has been huge down the middle for them as well. Consistent double-double guy, getting big boards, creating a big presence, stretching that floor, giving some space for Powell. But you also have to look at the progression of Norman Powell. This is a guy who was really contributing hard for Toronto, a guy who was a key, crucial piece for them. Didn't necessarily get the credit he wanted because when he started coming out of his shell, there was Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, and Fred VanVleet. When he goes to take another step, he goes to Portland, and they start going down the drain. They're on the back of Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum's leaving, and they're trying to turn a leaf over. He gets to the Clippers. Okay, he's now starting to be a bit more fortunate. You've got Kawhi Leonard, who's injured. Paul George has left the squad, and they're trying to find a bit of an identity. But that's been the perfect opportunity for Powell right now. At worst, Norman Powell will be an all-star this year. At absolute worst, he'll be an all-star this year. Do I expect him to maintain this? Maybe not. Do I think that'll change when someone like a Kawhi returns? Absolutely. But you do have to give the guy credit where it's due, when it's earned, and when it's owed. That's exactly where we are with Norman Powell right now. So at number 9 in my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Norman Powell of the Los Angeles Clippers. Over to number 8, and we head to the Eastern Conference, and we head to the absolute top of the Eastern Conference and the leader of the best team, arguably in basketball this year. I've got Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers at number 8 in my MVP race to the end of December. Big season so far for Mitchell. 32 games played, averaging 31.5 minutes, 28-4 record when he plays, and I've got him responsible for 10 of those wins, and I'm going to touch on that very shortly. On the season so far, for Donovan Mitchell, 23.7 points, 4.6 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.5 steals and 0.3 blocks. Again, we come back to efficiency, 2.1 turnovers a game, 45.6% from the field. Okay, I'd like to see that jump a little bit, but over 40% from deep at 41.5, 81% from the free throw line, so converts his opportunities there. Donovan Mitchell has been a scorer, he's been a playmaker, he's been an impact player since he stepped into the league, and people started arguing for him to be Rookie of the Year. Within 2-3 years, he's setting scoring records for Utah in the postseason, and now all of a sudden given an opportunity in Cleveland, 2-3 years into the experiment, and he's out here saying he wants to help lead this team to a championship. It's very viable that he can do that right now with the way the Cavaliers are playing their brand of basketball. Of course, the real question around Donovan Mitchell, as I pointed out there, 28-4 record, but responsible for 10 of those wins. That leaves 18 others on the board, but I want to explain exactly with Cleveland how they're operating right now, and this is a big reason that Donovan Mitchell does sit lower in my top 10. And they've got plenty of guys that are stepping up and providing, and guys who on any given night can lead, can show that they're the number one man on the team, or guys that can be a number one man on the team, and that's how they get the job done. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, I can point to instances of Jared Allen being the best player on the floor. There are multiple instances this year where I can point to a Darius Garland or an Evan Mobley for being the best players on the floor. We're talking about a Cleveland team that realistically, for me, has 3 all-star players. Now, when you consider that, it's going to be awfully tough for one of them to just stand out head and shoulders above the rest and get the recognition they may or may not deserve. But when you look at what Mitchell does from an efficiency standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, by buying in, by staying with the team and saying, hey, as a collective we can get this done, that's where a lot of his value comes from. It's very similar to what a Jalen Brunson has done previously in New York. It's now what Mitchell is doing in Cleveland. Yep, there are nights where I'm not going to be the best player on the floor, but I am going to be the cultural reason that we have success. And that's exactly where Donovan Mitchell is sitting right now. And that's why I've got him at number 8 in my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season. Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Over to number 7. And I just touched on New York, and I'm going to bring them back up again because this man on screen is having an absolute career year. And ultimately, it's probably going to come down to the fact that he may just be the 3rd best center in the league this year as to why he not only doesn't make the All-NBA first team, but potentially doesn't make the All-NBA second team. So we'll see how that all pans out. At number 7 in the MVP race, I've got Karl-Anthony Towns of the New York Knicks. So far in the year, 24.7 points, 13.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.9 blocks, but it's the efficiency levels here, not only from a shooting standpoint, but from a possession standpoint, not only for a guard, but for a big man. This is elite. 2.6 turnovers a game. Shooting 55% from the field, 43.8% from deep, and 83.3% from the free throw line. In 31 games, he's averaged 34.2 minutes, 22-9 record for 11 wins. He's at worst been the best player in every second game that his team has won, that he's participated in. He's converting realistically at 25, 14, and 3. 55% from the field, 44% from deep, 83% from the line. There's a chance here that Karl-Anthony Towns is starting to live up to that moniker of greatest shooting big man ever. Now, got a lot of work for me to be able to pass up someone like a Dirk Nowitzki. There's a lot of work to be involved there. And if you're just classifying him as shooting centres, there's another guy that's going to feature heavily in this list for most of the season and potentially for most of the rest of the decade, who's going to have a fair say in that as well. But when you're talking about guys 6'10 and above, yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns probably starting to enter that conversation. You think top of the class, 6'10 and above, you're thinking Dirk Nowitzki, you're thinking Larry Bird, those kind of shooters there. I'm not saying that he's there. I'm just saying that, if he's going to keep up a trajectory right like this in a market like New York where the pressure is always on, it's going to make a hell of a case. Really big season there for Karl-Anthony Towns. He's living up to the pressure in New York. Somewhat overshadowing what Jalen Brunson does bring to this team, and I think Brunson has had another all-star level season, but Karl-Anthony Towns is just absolutely relishing this new opportunity right now. Wasn't sure how he'd go coming out of Minnesota, thought his run as a number 1 option was done. I'm happy to put my hand up and say that there. I certainly think he's disproven that right now. I think now that the team's able to buy in on a big guy that can shoot, who's willing to commit, who's willing to compete, and you're able to get guys around him that do the same, you've got a very viable option here. Karl-Anthony Towns just continuing to tick a lot of boxes and proving to New York why this has been a crucial trade and a big reason why they're being competitive and potentially can finish as a top 2 seed here in the Eastern Conference. At number 7 in my MVP race to the end of December for 2024-25, Karl-Anthony Towns, the New York Knicks. Dropping down to number 6, and a guy who likely by the time we do this video again will not only drop out of the race but won't be eligible for the race. He's a guy that I thought started the season really, really strong. He's put Orlando into a really dominant position right now. They're starting to fall a little bit, but you would expect that when you lose 2 All-NBA caliber players to prolonged injury periods. At number 6, I still have in my list Franz Wagner of the Orlando Magic. Franz is out with an injury. He's out with an oblique injury. It's the same injury that Paolo Banchero went down with after only 4 or 5 games. It's exactly what Franz has gone down with. And I think that we've probably seen a cap on what Franz is going to do this year. No doubt he'll come back. No doubt he'll be an impact player. I think he's had an all-star level season. I think he's going to return and be an all-star level player. And I think Orlando's going to be better off when they both return, knowing that such a stage has been set. But Wagner on the season, 25 games, 33.2 minutes, a 16-9 record in games he played, and 12 wins. I mean, that's just astounding. But considering the guys that I'm going to mention in this list as we head into the top 5 are in similar circumstances, having had better luck of health and, for me, better teammates. 24.4 points, 5.6 rebounds, 5.7 assists, to go with 1.7 steals and 0.5 blocks on the year. 2.4 turnovers, efficiency with the ball in hand. 46.5 from the field. He's just a little under there for me. 3-point shot, not a great indicator of what he is as a shooter, but his free throw percentage certainly is. So that 32.1 from deep certainly negated by that 88.1 from the stripe. The key for Orlando right now is showing just how key his production has been. When you look at the fact that, and this is not throwing shade at Gorga Batazzi, at Karl-Anthony or Jalen Suggs, guys like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, guys like De Silva that are really trying to contribute to this team. But it shows just how important it is to have that high-level, offensive, productive player in your team in the modern game. Because there's no doubt Orlando's one of the leading defensive teams in the league. They're a team defense. They're committed. They don't overplay a lot. They don't undervalue people a lot. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of buy-in. That's all well and good, but when you don't have someone like a Wagner on the other end of the floor, it's when you struggle to win games. It's a prime example of that here in Orlando right now, and if anything, screams of his value to this team. Might be the last time we see him this year, unless he gets back and plays with perfect health. But number 6 in my MVP race to the end of December for the 2024-25 season, Franz Wagner of the Orlando Magic. Moving into the top 5, and you'll see exactly what I mean as far as how crucial it is for guys with wins, production, contributions, and health. Because here is the epitome of what health does for you. Just a really, really nice season once again. At number 5, I've got Anthony Davis of the Los Angeles Lakers. He's played 30 games, averaged 35.3 minutes a game, an 18-12 record. And in those 18 wins, I've got him responsible for 12 of them. That is the same amount of games that we had for Franz Wagner there. Of course, the Lakers, they are clinging to it. 7th, 8th seed consistently over the last couple of weeks, and certainly the last month. They've just had the backside fall out of the way that their team plays. But Anthony Davis, he has managed to stay healthy, and for me is having his most productive season since 2020. And as far as impact, well, you could certainly argue from a leadership standpoint, his best season since 2017-18. Davis, 26 points, 11.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists to go, 1.2 steals and 2 blocks. Again, we're talking about the efficiency here. 2.2 turnovers, 52.7 from the field, 31.3 from deep. Never been a prominent 3-point shooter. Never has been. Has the ability to hit them when he needs to. 77.6 from the free throw line. He'll look to increase that there. The issue for the Lakers right now, though, is there's not enough balance in the team going to Davis There's in the sense of him producing offensively and being able to do what he needs to defensively. But on the other side of that, they either overforce him currently in the offensive possession, or he tries to force the offense himself, doesn't get it done, or there's too much, he's too timid and doesn't want to take the game on. Now, whether that's by instruction, whether that's by coaching style, I don't know, but it's been the one question mark with Davis in Los Angeles. There was some talk during the month that Anthony Davis might be left to his own devices in LA with a potential trade or release of LeBron James. Now, it hasn't come to fruition. I don't expect it to come to fruition, but it certainly would change things and give a little bit more perspective to exactly what kind of player Davis could be. I mean, you look at the age Anthony Davis is right now, you look at the situation he is in his career, he needs, in my mind, to have another 1 or 2, potentially 3 years of him just being the man. Number one, get someone to give him the ball, see if he can put a few more years like this out on the floor, try and get deep into the playoffs, potentially lead a title. It's going to be tough, but I think that's what they need to do. Certainly with the way he's playing this year, there's no reason the Lakers can't do that. At number 5, in my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season, it's Anthony Davis of the Los Angeles Lakers. Moving to number 4, and this guy just keeps making noise as far as where he is going to end up this year in this race. He's got a fair bit of ground to catch for me, but he's having a fantastic year once again. All-NBA first-team level player, and once again, he's probably making an all-defensive level ploy as well. It's going to be tough because we have some pretty good specialist defenders, but from an offensive standpoint, I mean, this guy's having one of the most effective, as far as production from the floor, as effective season that the league's ever seen. At number 4, I've got Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. He's played 25 games, 32.6 minutes a game, a 14-11 record in those 25 games, and I've got him responsible for 12 of those 14 wins. Giannis is averaging 32.6 points, 11.6 rebounds, 6 assists, 0.8 steals and 1.4 blocks on 3.4 turnovers, whilst shooting 61% from the floor. 22.2 from deep. We know he's not a jump shooter. He's working on that mid-range. 61.4 from the free throw line. Never been reliable from the line. No doubt that'll improve, certainly, as that mid-range game develops. And we're talking about a guy here, in rounded number terms, 33, 12 and 6 on 61% from the field. There's only been one instance in league history of a guy averaging 30 a game on 60% from the field, and that was Giannis last year. When you look at the production that he's putting in, when you look at how the team plays without him, and I know they've had a little modicum of success this year without him, when you really look at how they function on both ends of the floor, there's no doubt that the value of this guy here, I mean, it's as big as anybody in the league. And we're talking about a guy who potentially could get a third MVP. Now, if you're talking about a guy with 3 MVPs, a finals MVP, a scoring title, and a Defensive Player of the Year award, there's only one other guy on that list. If he wins the scoring title, he joins one other guy, along with that original, Michael Jordan being one of them, and David Robinson. Like, that's the kind of level of season Giannis is having. That's the kind of resume that this guy's building. The problem is that he's had a couple of down years. There's been some real turnaround as far as superstars at the top of the league and what they're producing and where they now sit in the pantheon of players. But that's the kind of level that Giannis is at. I mean, people forget the conversations that were being had about Giannis only a few years ago. He's certainly reminding them this year. At number 4, in my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Milwaukee Bucks. Over to the podium, and we have some movers and shakers. At number 3, in my MVP race to the end of December for the 2024-25 NBA season, it's the leader of the reigning defending champion Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum. In 30 games, he's averaged 36.3 minutes, a 22-8 record, and 14 wins credited to his name. 28.3 points, 9.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists to go with 1.3 steals and 0.5 blocks per contest. Another efficient ball user, less than 3 turnovers at 2.8. 46.6% from the field. I don't mind that, getting towards that 47%, so just a little under where you would like him to be. 36.9% from deep, getting towards 37% on an extremely high volume team, but he is converting 79.7% from the free throw line. You would like to see that improve. Jason Tatum's just in the wrong place in the wrong time, and it's pretty much the story of his career right now. When you look at how he plays it, the game, yep, there's some moments where you go, damn, this guy's the best player in the league. There are some moments where you go, okay, he might be the number 2 option on his team. You see that a lot, and that's purely from the aggression, the constant exertion of aggression that Jaylen Brown has. But Jaylen Brown has more off nights than he does on nights. It's not something I can say for Jason Tatum. And I love Jaylen Brown. I thought Jaylen Brown was an All-NBA player last year. He was absolutely the Finals MVP last year. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But there's no doubt about it, the way Tatum is playing this year, he had a vengeance in his heart to really get back at the critics for his championship run, and certainly to get back at the critics and those who refuse to play him in the Olympics. For Boston, it's going to be really interesting to see how they can flourish. Obviously, heading into January and towards the All-Star break, this is a team that you're going to want to not face. They're going to be on cruise control for quite a while. And they are running obviously a high-octane three-point offense. But once they start getting into the flow of things, they are not a team that you are going to want to face. Tatum, for me, is having the best run as a Celtic that the team has seen since Larry Bird. And that is no shade whatsoever to Paul Pierce. Because I've got all the respect in the world for Paul Pierce when he was leading a genuinely no-good team to conference finals in the early 2000s, when he was able to deliver a finals MVP, 14-time All-Star, all of that sort of stuff that he did for Boston. But at no point could I say that Paul Pierce was a top 3 player in the NBA. I have no worries in saying that Jason Tatum right now is a top 3 player in the NBA. And that's why he's third in my MVP race to the end of December for 2024-25, Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. Coming in at number 2, though, and it's a toss-up for me between this guy and my number 1. How the voters will go, I don't know. I think realistically, if you're going to look from a media standpoint, how the league is probably looking from the broader media standpoint, from your ESPNs to your Fox to your NBA.coms, this guy's probably sitting at number 1. The guy I mentioned next, number 1 or number 2, and Giannis probably at number 3. But at number 2, I have Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. Big call to make. But again, if I stick true to everything that I've spoken about as far as on pace to 65 games, leading his team to wins, in playoff contention, not in trade talks, I mean, Jokic ticks all those boxes. Ultimately, it's going to come down to the fact that Nikola Jokic this year, through to the end of December, is averaging 31 points, 12.9 rebounds, 9.5 assists a game. A rounded 31, 13, and 10. And he's been averaging a 30-point triple-double most of the season. He's had a couple of low-passing games in the past week. Ultimately, what's cost him that 10 assists. 1.8 steals, 0.6 blocks on 3.5 turnovers. Highly efficient considering the usage rate. And speaking of efficiency, 56.5% from the field, 48.9 from deep. He's one of the elite three-point shooters. 79.4 from the free throw line. Played 28 games, 37.2 minutes in those games. They're 17 and 11 when he plays, and 16 wins to his name. We're talking about a 3-time MVP who's having statistically his best season yet. It's like watching LeBron James in 2013. At the back end of his absolute zenith, LeBron had his best year. Now, it wasn't statistically. LeBron has had better statistical years. But the stats didn't back up the eye test and the impact, which was LeBron James in 2013. Well, the thing here is that the stats back up the eye test with Nikola Jokic. And, yeah, sure, his prototype certainly isn't that of a dominant player when you want to watch it. You don't see a Joel Embiid. You don't see the athleticism of a Bam Adebayo or a Jaren Jackson Jr. But beyond all of that, when you actually look at his fundamentals of the game, the ability to score, the ability to rebound, the ability to pass, he's become a better team defender. He's got one of the highest basketball IQs on the planet. When you put all of that together, you add the numbers and you look at the impact, it's why you have to seriously consider the fact that Jokic may very well win a 4th MVP. I just don't have him there at the moment. At number 2, in my MVP race to the end of December, 24-25 NBA season, Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. But at number 1, I have probably the most productive shooting guard season on both sides of the floor that the league has seen since Michael Jordan. That's the level of production that I'm seeing out of my number 1 player, the leader of my MVP race to the end of December for the 24-25 NBA season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. 32 games played, 34.5 minutes, 27-5 record, and I have him responsible for 19 of those wins. 2/3 of those wins. And the numbers back it up. 31.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists to go with 2 steals and 1.2 blocks a game on 2.7 turnovers. Epic efficiency too, 52.8 from the field, 35% from deep, 81.8 from the free throw line. It's gotten to the point now where the only criticism that anyone can possibly find of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the fact that people feel that he is a free throw merchant. Now, does Shai get to the line? Absolutely he does get to the line. But if the criticism of a shooting guard getting to the line is the reason you can't have him as an MVP, then I don't want to hear anything about James Harden's run as a scorer. I don't want to hear about Dwayne Wade as a scorer. Mike didn't mind going to the free throw line. But all 3 of those, in their own unique way, have one thing in common. The same Shai with Shai here. They take on the game, they attack it, they drive to the rim, they draw contact, they get to the line. That's just going to happen in the game of basketball. If your only criticism right now of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the fact that he goes to the free throw line, then you truly can't appreciate what he's bringing to the league right now. This is his 3rd season averaging 30. This is his lowest free throw rate of all of them. It's even lower than last year when people suddenly had a love for Shai. And I talk about this all the time when I talk about Shai, and I'll continue to talk about it. Jerry West saw this guy as the next big thing. He pleaded with Kawhi and pleaded with Paul George to keep this guy. Then all of a sudden, year after year after year, he's added to the production of OKC. He's been threatening to do this for quite a long time. And now he's at the forefront of arguably the best rounded team in basketball as their number 1 man by a margin. And that's why I've got him 3 games clear of anyone else this season. Leading my MVP race, the number 1 in my MVP race to the end of December for the 2024-25 NBA season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder.